I was working at Chrysler Corporation as a tool and process engineer and had a full-blown Kundalini experience. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but it is a full, unlimited awakening of consciousness. And when that occurs, you have no limits in time and space. You see everything, you hear everything, you see beings and people and lights that they weren't real before. You hear everywhere in space and time, and I did not sleep for 3 years because consciousness has no need to sleep, just the body does. I had been studying consciousness and working with people for quite a while. I'm going to say at least a decade, when I realized that they couldn't hold the consciousness if they weren't healthy. And then I myself got severe rheumatoid arthritis, and I ended up deciding I'm going to go to school, learn medicine. So I went to naturopathic school, became a naturopathic physician, and I really just did it for me. But eventually I ended up using that information in so many ways everywhere. And now I teach a class, I teach a lot of classes in Intuition 1 through 7. I teach a class in organic gardening and one in getting well naturally, in which I teach people how to heal the body using a combination of things that also includes some conventional medicine, but I think more on that later. Conventional and natural medicine, I think they fit together. Over the years, a lot of things started to change. I came from a farming, ranching, cattle dealing family. And as big business became big business in a very major way, the entire enticement was away from the farm and into the factory. And it was the thing was, life was supposed to be easier. That was what attracted people. Oh, it's hard work when you're working the land, growing your food, and all of that. And so little by little, people began moving away from the soil. And we're now like 5 generations away from the soil, and each generation has suffered another level of degeneration, and we are now at a critical place, almost unable to repopulate. We can't reproduce. Lots of problems there. Back in the early 1900s, I believe it was, there was a lot of people, a lot of scientists and doctors and people from Harvard and lots of places, big schools, and they were all talking about there's got to be some germ somewhere. There's got to be a problem, something is invading, because Pasteur's work was getting well known. And it wasn't really well known up until that point. But everybody was looking for, why is everyone's teeth falling out? Why are they suffering from alcoholism? What is this thing called depression? Why are people showing up with cancers? Tuberculosis was a terrible plague. And so there was this, I'll call it this scientific push to find out what was the culprit. And it was Dr. Weston Price, who was a dentist, who said, maybe there's not something present. Maybe there's something that's not present. What could that be? And he began to study. He eventually took a team of people around the world 14 years in a row. And in that research, he realized that what was missing was nutrition. And he brought foods back. He wrote a seminal book. That was the 1920s, and we have continued to degenerate ever since then. So we're in a bad way right now. I learned early on that there was people were comfortable. They didn't want to make any big changes in their life as long as they were comfortable. It wasn't until the problem, the health thing, really hit them. At that point, they were looking for answers and began to ask questions. And that has really become what I see as a civilization-wide challenge or opportunity right now to have this change, to bring about this change, to introduce a change, to introduce new ideas and new ways of doing things so that we can overcome the problems that have been created by the system that's coming apart and really have an opportunity to create something new based on what we have learned. And we have learned a lot. A new world is being born here, and if you want to survive and thrive, then you have to become a new human. And that new human is needed if we're going to create a new world. And we cannot do this without assessing who we are and how we want our lives to be. That's critical. That can't be skipped. We are an amazing group of humans on a small planet. We are here to enjoy life. I think we've forgotten how, but that is the main reason for being here. And learn to create more life, not just create it, but then nurture it so that it grows. We are here to evolve. We are designed to evolve. And you either evolve or you come apart. Let's get into just a little bit of religion, because it really begins with organized religion. If you have a religion or any kind of organization that allows you or forces you or pushes you or tells you that you have to put the God that they claim exists outside yourself and honor that as an external authority, what they're saying is it contains this concept that the authority, the real authority, is outside the self. And what happens over time is that little by little, you begin to not trust yourself to say what is. Little by little, the subjective angle, the subjective side of what is happening in the reality gets pushed aside. And then you have science piling on. Science was also a victim of that same organized religion. And so there was a split between science and religion. And the result was that objectivity became the only thing that was, I'll say, legitimate. And what happens when you take out subjectivity? You end up without the individual. The individual's perspective, their contribution, their way of doing things, all that goes out the window. I think the best way to remedy that is to develop the individuals, to reteach, to get people involved with their own consciousness and develop that consciousness and reinstate the inner authority that has been lost. And with that comes trust in the self. And with that comes this magical unfolding of the individual. Everybody flowers. Maybe we need to expand our consciousness, and I've been teaching people to do that for 40 years now. And it's something that once people get a taste, once they start that journey within, they're hooked. There's nothing as fascinating, nothing as powerful as that journey within. And I think once we begin to do that on a culture-wide scale, the whole civilization will transform. It's something that is so powerful and has so much promise. I don't think we can avoid doing that. I don't think we can skip that. If we want to expand consciousness, we want to develop people, then we have to ask, what is it that really changes? So consciousness is, you have to take into account the frequency of the individual. We are, and this comes right out of the lab, my research, 15 years with Dr. Levengood, each individual is a collection of frequencies. And the frequencies determine the kind of consciousness you can have. And then Robert Monroe's work backs up some of that, a lot of that. So when you want to expand consciousness, you very carefully, you very gently move people into various areas that they haven't been invited into before with their consciousness. They perform and then they're shocked at their own performance. And what comes out of that is they begin to be willing to put their own contribution out into the civilization. And we have this magnificent civilization that's like a compilation of everybody's gift goes into that pot of soup, so to speak, and makes this wonderful mix of realities. And then we have this chance to celebrate that and build on that. And little by little, the individuals that have opened begin to open others, and it begins to spread. And so if you understand frequency and you know how to work with that, then it's not difficult to teach people to expand their consciousness. The way to change frequency is really to understand that it changes naturally all by itself over the course of each day. There is a cycle of consciousness that is natural, and so we cycle. If we were living naturally without the big corporations, we would be in beta consciousness, which is roughly 12 to 15 cycles per second. If you relax a little bit, your frequencies slow down. That's alpha. That's like 9 to 12 cycles per second. If you relax a little bit more, you go down into theta, and you can relax even further and go down into delta. We naturally cycle through those all day long, and it's about a 2-hour cycle. And there's much more complexity to it than I think we have time for here. But that cycle, once you realize that that's natural and that we can take advantage of that, and there are other higher cycles above beta, there's gamma, or high beta and then gamma, and there are others above that they're coming up with. Those are different frequencies, and each one allows a different kind of perception. And once people begin to understand that, and you teach them how to move into the various types of perception, they get it, just like that. We have this magnificent brain that it's everything, okay? So the brain's job is to run the body. And it also is a receiver and a transmitter. It's taking in, and you'll hear people say, oh, but we're only using 10% of the brain, as if we're not using the other 90%, and we are. What is that other 90% tuned into? It's tuned into the rest of the cosmos. That 10% is for here. Some people maybe only use 5% here. But we have this magnificent brain, and when you learn how to manage your brainwave frequencies, you can move deliberately into various frequency ranges and control the kind of information available to you. So that is something that I think we should be teaching children from the ground up, because the consciousness is where our power is. The brain's job is really to run the body and to help us manage that ocean of frequencies that we live within. The brain receives frequency, it transmits frequency, and it is our tool. It is the tool that helps us navigate the reality. And when the brain doesn't work, then we tend to get really upset with individuals who either can't manage that, they can't get involved or they can't see the things that other people see, or they see more than other people see. When you start to evolve your consciousness, the body changes. The body is a set of frequencies. Consciousness is this tool, this perceiver that points at and sort of takes in, digests, and interprets whatever frequency is coming at it. That could be a cat, a car, whatever. And so when you begin to point your consciousness to places that are higher frequency, what happens is that the DNA, which is a set of frequency receivers, begins to change. DNA responds to whatever set of frequencies you happen to be at. Your frequency signature is not set in stone. And if you were to hypnotize somebody and they had multiple personality disorder, and you took a DNA sample from them in one of their personalities, and then you hypnotize them to go into another personality, it would be a different DNA. That's how flexible DNA is. So we have some misperceptions about DNA and genes and things like that. So when you have the body, when you say it's all in the body, what you're really saying is that as you change your perception, your body is very dynamic and it's changing right along with you. And that means your chemistry changes, your hormones change. Your hormones manage all of your responses, and that really, your reaction changes. And so it's all in the body. It's a body-mind system. Well, we have this really terrible separation happening between body and mind, and that's part of the legacy of the medical system that we have. That unfortunately, when we began to specialize, we began to break up the body into pieces and parts. And one of the other legacies is the legacy of religion. Religion has separated people from their own mind. And that is something that I think is tragic. We have, in that separation, not yet been able to put ourselves back together again. I think that's what we're heading into. I think that's what the medicine of the future is going to do. But when you have a body, or people think of their body as this some unusual structure that they somehow are in, but they never think of themselves as being in that body. They don't realize that they're a mind or a consciousness that is coming from and through that body. It falls apart. The body-mind system becomes two separate things that have no real connection. And the bottom line is, you don't use the body to verify the consciousness, and you don't use the consciousness to heal the body. And that's a tragedy. The problem with the medicine of today, what I'll call conventional medicine, is that it's populated by specialists. And so you have the ear, nose, and throat guy, and you have the heart guy, and you have the podiatrist, and you have the dentist, and all of these specialists. And the result of that has been this fracturing. And that fracturing has resulted in people treating their body like it's a machine. And it's a living, thinking, feeling being that is dynamically evolving and meant to evolve much further. And so we have this really sad condition that we're caught up in right now. And that fracturing has to come back together. I think that's the job, like I said, of the new medicine that's coming. The medicine of the future is really going to be, I like to call it energy medicine. It is this magnificent understanding. We need a paradigm shift in terms of our understanding of ourselves. And that's in process right now, but the medicine of the future will have made that paradigm shift, and that they will understand that the body is a result of the energy pattern that underlies the physical self. And when you fix something at the energetic level, the body naturally repairs itself. If that energy is not good or not coherent or has been corrupted, just like a file on a CD or in your computer, when it's corrupted, then all of the messaging that goes on in the body gets corrupted as well. And things start to break down. Diseases appear, problems appear, and people often try to treat that as just that one little area of the body, when it's really the whole energy system. And I think that's the magnificence of the energy system, the future. In fact, when I'm looking at an individual and I see the lights around them, you can see that there's a problem coming in those lights. And sure enough, it'll show up in the body later on. And I think the future is really about light, it's about energy, it's about frequency, it's about sound, it's about using some of the frequencies of Mother Nature, some herbs. It's food. Oh my gosh, people don't understand what food can do. We're not really getting real food right now, but if we had real food, we would have miracles happening, especially if it was high-density nutrition food. So those are the factors of the future. The things we do at home are going to be the food and the herbs and maybe the exercise. And when you go to the healer, that's going to be the person who specializes in analyzing or providing the light, the sound, the music, the warmth. Those things change your frequency pattern, and then that changes you, changes the body. One of the saddest things from my point of view that's been going on, and I was personally aware of it, trying to get things published, is that so many of the articles in the Journal of the American Medical Association or even the British journals, 50% of those were fake. They had data that was either made up or it was contrived, or it was data that didn't show the actual results of some sort of scientific experiment. And when you had data that was legitimate, you couldn't get it published. And that really, we had, when I was with Dr. Levengood in the lab, he had direct instructions that said, you will not talk about this, and you will not bring up that, and you will not discuss, and you will not submit any papers. And if he did submit papers on certain topics, and it was the gamut of things, not just biophysics, but meteorology, what was happening in the skies, plants, what was happening in agriculture, all of that. They didn't want to hear it. My own self, trying to get things published, was people would call and say, can we take this part of the article out? And I would say, but that's the core. Well, the advertisers won't like that. There you have it. I think those journals publish fake data for several reasons. It's not just one reason. One is that we have this culture of one-upmanship that is insidious. And the person at the top of the mountain gets all of the credit and all of the acknowledgement. That's not the way to run a civilization. Everybody is needed, and everybody's input is needed. Another thing is money. If you could get more stuff published, then you could get more money. And money is not just something that you put in your pocket anymore. It's a means of survival. And we have, another reason is because of competition. We have degenerated into a society of competition instead of cooperation. And when you put those together, it becomes ugly. Every single society, every single civilization, every group of people starts out where everybody is working together, and then they specialize. And you end up with sectors. And these sectors are things like government. You have to have rules. Food, you have to feed people. Medicine, you have to heal people. Education, you have to educate people. Science, you want to keep studying and get better and better. In business and trade, there's financial systems that evolve. There are futuristic kinds of things. There's art, all the music and dance, and all of those are sectors. Technology comes along, makes life better, hopefully, and easier. And each one of those sectors is critical, and they form a paradigm. And you can't just come along and change one of those sectors. All of the rest change in response. What we're dealing with right now is not so much that something has gone wrong, as much as we have outgrown the paradigm that we were in. When a paradigm reaches full flowering, it produces its top people begin to go outside that, and it looks like, feels like, sounds like everything is falling apart. But really it's not falling apart. It's going to disintegrate to a degree, and then it's going to come together in a new way, with a new paradigm, new ways of governing, new ways of educating, new ways of feeding yourselves, new ways of thinking about business and technology and art and religion and science and all those things. They change. And it's a painful process, but it's part of the evolutionary unfolding of a civilization, because we are meant to move from third dimension to fourth to fifth, and that means stepping up to higher frequency ranges and dropping some of the lower frequencies. I think this is one of the most marvelous opportunities for us as a civilization. I know a lot of people are anxious, but there's no need to be anxious. This is a normal part of a process. It's the unfolding of a whole new way of seeing and doing and being. And without that, we will disintegrate and come to nothing. So it's either survive and thrive or disintegrate and die. So, for example, when you have a sector that has flowered and now begun to degenerate, we'll use agriculture, for example. What you have is a system that produces food for millions of people, but there's no nutrition in that food. And then people begin to get sick, and they begin to fall apart at younger and younger ages. If you have governance, the governance becomes corrupt. If you have medicine, the medicine begins to be a business instead of an effort to heal. Things like that begin to be common. And so you have to look at what is the legacy of each sector and what is the possibility. And let's go back to agriculture for just a moment. The possibility for agriculture is that we begin to grow food indoors, that we begin to grow within frequency fields, that we begin to understand the need to supply all of the nutritional needs via frequency and other ways, so that that plant will feed us magnificently. I'm reminded when we get to talking about agriculture of how disconnected we have become from Mother Nature. And people don't really know how to connect. They don't understand what has been happening with the food, with nature, with the water, with the soil, and that's dangerous. We need a backup system. Nature is our backup system, and you cannot afford to ignore that. One of the things that is really critical when you are feeding animals that are going to feed you is that you have to pay attention to what those animals are eating, because they will suffer the same kinds of degeneration that a human will suffer if they don't get the nutrition. And then, let's say if you're going to have beef or a chicken or whatever it is you're growing that is to feed you, if that, for instance, that beef is not fed the right foods, then the hamburgers or the beef or the steak or whatever it is, when you cook it, it shrinks away to nothing. Right there, that's a sign that that cow did not get enough calcium. They had too much potassium in their feed. And that is, you get feed that is cardboard-like. It's tasteless. It's awful. It doesn't have the magnificent flavor or the nutrition and the aminos that you need to have. If you raise chickens and you just raise them on feed and they don't get grass and they don't get bugs that they choose, then they don't have the aminos. Same with their eggs. You don't get all of the factors that go with those aminos as well. And so we end up eating that and then we suffer. It takes a huge amount of effort for the body to process that food, looking for something that is what we'll call the payoff. And the payoff isn't there. One of the problems, the great problems that I see with our animal operations is that animals are crowded into these little tiny spaces. Well, that creates stress. Animals are just like humans. Humans are wired for two things, pain and pleasure. And when pleasure is happening, they're going to do well, they're going to absorb nutrition. When stress occurs, pain is triggered. And when that happens, nothing is absorbed. So whatever you're feeding your animals, that nutrition does not go in, and that nutrition will not be in the eggs or the milk or the food that that animal is providing. And we are the losers. So when you have animals that are crowded together and they're all stressed out, stress prevents the uptake of nutrition. And when that animal is being fed all this wonderful stuff, and then they're too stressed to be able to take it in, then that's a problem. They degenerate, and so do you. We are wired for two things, and so are animals, pain and pleasure. When pleasure is happening, when things are going well, there's perfect nutritional uptake, and you can even uptake from, the atmosphere around you. When pain is occurring, that's a stress. And when the stress response occurs, all nutritional absorption stops. And that animal goes down and it does not provide the nutrition that we need. Everybody suffers. We're having an epidemic of mineral shortages in human beings. When you don't have the minerals in your system, and people don't really know that they need minerals, they think vitamins, but not minerals. The result is that it affects your perception. It affects what you can do with your consciousness. And so if you don't have enough magnesium in your system, then you don't want to be touched. And if you don't have enough calcium, it's difficult to think in a linear fashion. And we have linear perception here. We are not quite yet multidimensional in our perception. If you don't have potassium, then you can't, you begin to see things that other people don't see. And then people say, oh, he's having a hallucination. Oh, he needs a drug. Oh, he put him in a hospital. He's not being real, or he's not able to handle reality, or. Each one of the minerals, and there are 6 majors, and like 99 or 100 trace minerals, they're all needed. And they each contribute to perception. And when you don't have those, then your consciousness does not have the full power that it's capable of being. And there we are. We suffer because of that. So let's talk about stress for a moment. The stress syndrome is something that is literally a physical thing. It's not just a fantasy. It's not just an emotional, oh, he's upset. When you have a stress, and it doesn't matter to the body whether it's a tiger chasing you, or whether it's your boss yelling at you, or whether it's your imagination worrying about something, then what happens is you trigger that pain stress syndrome. And that then, within 2 minutes in the body, all digestion shuts down, all blood is withdrawn from the extremities of the body and moved into the trunk. The thinking being, or the perception of the body being, well, I could live without a leg if that tiger got my leg, or I could live without an arm, but I can't live without my heart, my liver, my stomach, my spleen, things like that. And so blood moves into the center of the body, and blood thickeners pour into the bloodstream. And that's in case you get bitten by something. You want to slow down the blood loss. And so if you have Monday morning executives going to work and getting all stressed out about, back in the saddle again, back into the stress mode, and there are more heart attacks that happen on Monday because not only does blood get withdrawn and thickened, the blood vessels and arteries, the cardiovascular system, shrinks so that blood flow is obstructed. And that results in all kinds of problems. Now, you can live with a temporary stress. Within 2 minutes, all of that is in place. And that's called stage 1 of the general adaptation syndrome, also known in the vernacular as the stress syndrome. And stage 1 can go on for up to 2 years. All digestion shuts down. Now, mind you, after 1.5 years or 2, you cannot afford to not be getting nutrition for that amount of time. Stage 2 is you begin to produce more and more of these chemicals: cortisone, cortisol, adrenaline, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Those things they make you gain weight. They cause all kinds of perceptual problems. And in the long run, if you live with those, for stage 2 is you just keep living with those, and there's no nutrition coming in. And diarrhea, vomiting, all kinds of problems happen. And then stage 3 of the general adaptation syndrome is exhaustion. And at that point, you have to have relief. You have to have relief from the stress. Because if you don't, you're going to trigger your genetic weakness, or catch whatever's going around, or succumb to some kind of awful physical experience. And that is epidemic in our civilization, in the West especially. When you get caught in that general adaptation syndrome, that stress response, and you stop absorbing nutrition, you really, at that point, you need to be aware that you need 4 times as much nutrition to be going in on a regular basis for those little moments when the stress response drops. That nutrition needs to be there. And when you're not putting the nutrition in to begin with, and then you're not absorbing, when you are putting it in, if you're taking vitamins and minerals and you're taking amino acids and all of the things that you need, and you're caught in the stress response, you're just in a vicious cycle because you're not taking it in. It's not coming in the rest of the time. It's really becomes a very sorry ending for people. A lot of people will end up taking supplements, a lot of supplements, but they don't always have the cofactors that are needed for that supplement or that vitamin, that mineral, to be absorbed and utilized in a way that is good for the body. Food has all kinds of cofactors in it. Those cofactors help prevent infection, staph and strep infection. You get paciferins and oxones. Those are factors that a plant produces to help you absorb and use and protect. There are all sorts of other cofactors that work together in a food that the plant produces because it's an intelligent system. And you lose out when you're not getting, if you're just eating processed food, you're not getting those factors. Or if you're sending your food across the ocean, somebody's getting the benefits of what you would have had because those paciferins and oxones are specific to your local weather and soil and the kinds of problems that you have physically in your area. We can do a lot with microgreens, for instance, raw foods. Microgreens have, on the average, 400 to 800 times more nutrient in them than the same plant would have if you let it grow out fully. So putting those in smoothies. Lots and lots of food is destroyed by cooking, overcooking especially. Raw foods, their nutrition, their proteins have not been denatured. All of that is something that I think we need to begin being aware of if we want to be healthy. Water is another factor that we really need to pay attention to. We have water available for a lot of people, but it's dead. It's dead water. Dead water has a spin that is a right-hand spin on the molecules in the water. Living water has a left-hand spin. A left-hand spin is form building. It's magnetic. It draws what you need and helps shape that to become a beautiful, healthy form, whether that's a protein or some other structure in the body. Dead water with a right-hand spin is explosive. It's meant to break down. When water is drawn out of the earth, before it's mature, before it comes up naturally to the surface, or comes out of the sky, then it's dead water. If it sits, it's dead water. If it gets warm, it's dead water. Millions of people are drinking dead water, and it's very hard on the body. Hands down, water is the most basic form of medicine, and people have been known to heal from tremendously frightening diseases just by drinking living water. If you're trying to keep your frequency up, or you're trying to raise your frequency, there's a few different ways that you can go about doing that. The way that I like is through breath work. That is very, very powerful. Another thing is to be conscious of where you're paying attention and what you are paying attention to. If you always watch, would it be, crime TV, that's going to take your frequencies down. If you only listen to bad news and you don't balance that with good news, that takes your frequency down. If you have not done what I call root work, you get to the root of your biases and your fears, then your frequency stays low. Music, you can watch cat videos and laugh until you almost cry. And those bring your frequency up. The things that bring a frequency up are joy, laughter, being with others, connecting with others, being recognized by others, and not recognized, you don't have to be a global name, household name, but just somebody who looks at you and smiles. That raises frequency. Love is a force. It's a magnetic attractive force. It's what holds the body together. It's the core of every individual. Now, it does get covered over by your fears and your biases and your worries and the things that you think you need that you really don't need. Those get in the way. But once you do root work and you peel away the biases and all the fears and angers and that he had no right or she had no right to say or do that to me, once all that is gone, your core is love. And you end up falling in love. You fall in love with the world. You fall in love with plants, with animals. You fall in love with everything and everybody, even the fools. Love is something that it's a magnificent kind of life. It brings a magnificent kind of life. Love brings a magnificent life. Love is critical. Love is this willingness to be honest. I often say love is an honest response. It doesn't have to be mean. It just needs to be something from the heart, something from the core, something from the gut. A new world is being born. And what does it mean when we say you have to become a new human? That means you have to think differently. You have to make different assumptions about reality. You have to make different alignments in terms of what you're willing to support and what you're not willing to support. There's a whole different mindset. There are different actions. There is a different way of approaching people, of responding to people. And there's a different way of handling and honoring the self. And that new human is waiting in the wings for all of us. When you become a new human, you end up falling in love with yourself. It's not just everything around you, it's you. And you begin to accept the fact that you're human. No apologies needed.